We're coming close to the end of Banned Books Week, and to get some perspective on what this week means for those who work in our library systems, I'm joined by Jason Kucsma. He is the director of the Toledo-Lucas County Public Library System, as well as Nancy Eames, who is the library's youth services coordinator. I just want to first start with this question for you, Jason. Banned books, it's a very controversial thing, and it's happening more frequently in library systems. And so, from the leadership perspective, how do you approach this?
Yeah, it's a good question, Jaden. I appreciate that, and thanks for having us on. I'm definitely going to be deferring to my colleague Nancy because she's been at this for much longer than I have. But I guess I'll start by saying that you will not see Toledo Lucas County Public Library having a whole lot of banned book celebrations and things like that. We may have some displays up of some books that have been challenged and things like that, but for the most part, we celebrate intellectual freedom every day. And anytime that we can put books in the hands of our community members or provide access to information, that is us celebrating that intellectual freedom. And so I appreciate banned books because it does put a spotlight on the fact that there are individuals and groups who would like to limit people's access to that kind of information, but I prefer sometimes really to celebrate really the First Amendment and some of the Bill of Rights that libraries are built upon, which privileges that access to information and freedom of speech.
I think that's absolutely right. I think one of our core values is that libraries are for everyone. And so we want our collections to reflect our community and for everybody to see themselves represented in the materials that they find here at the public library.
And Nancy, is this something that you've encountered more of recently with people maybe challenging a book for any specific reason?
I don't know that here in Toledo at the public library that we've necessarily seen any uptick. I think our colleagues in school libraries are seeing more challenges. There are, some organized groups out there and some kind of hit lists of books that folks are encouraging parents to check and see if your school has this in the library.
Yeah, and Jason, you mentioned that intellectual freedom is something that libraries really pride themselves on. And so what does that mean to you in terms of opening up access to materials that are controversial?
Well, I mean, we build collections based on our community's interests. The people that purchase the materials for our book are librarians. They're professionals who have an entire rubric of processes and skills that they put to work to select materials that they think are appropriate for our community members. And sure, there are going to be things that don't resonate with some people or that may offend someone's sensibilities, and that's fine. Don't check those out. And we really think it's the right and the responsibility of individuals and parents and caregivers to be helping, especially for youth. And we talk about providing access for kids to books. There are times when a kid will pick up a book and see something in a character that they don't see in their community, they don't see in their homes, and it really opens up the world to them. And the idea of limiting that seems really counterintuitive, and it runs completely counter to what we do in public libraries. And I'll add too, banning books or censorship is wildly unpopular. So as Nancy mentioned, there's a small group of really vocal activists who are out there that are trying to make decisions for large communities, groups that are trying to make decisions or impose their will on communities that they're not even part of. But there have been polls that show that 7 in 10 voters really from varying political parties. This is nonpartisan. They oppose efforts to remove books from libraries, and 74%. A recent study from the American Library Association or poll said that 74% of respondents said that they really have a high degree of trust in the librarians who are choosing those books for their collection, and that they're making them available to the community.
Yeah, and Nancy, Jason mentioned something that was important to, I think, expand on, which was youth, because this issue is certainly one that youth get involved in where adults are speaking on behalf of youth. And so, as a youth services coordinator, what are some of the considerations that you take into providing materials for youth and connecting them to resources?
Well, we know that there are all kinds of families in our community. And so, like I said before, we want to have materials that reflect everyone's identities and values. And your children's librarian, your teen services librarian, that's the person you want to get to know because they're going to help you and your family find the books that meet your values and your interests. We definitely believe in having something for everybody. Jason used the expression about books being windows for kids. Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop famously quoted that books should be windows and mirrors for children. It helps you see into lives that are perhaps different from your own, but also reflects back to you your own identity and experience, and that's just as valuable.
Yeah, and Jason, as a library director, I'm sure you've seen the debates that happen in our country about polarizing issues. What role would you say libraries play in actually bridging that divide and offering that window into differing life experiences? Because it sounds like libraries could play a key role in maybe healing some of the divisions in the country.
It's like you're reading my mind, Jaden. I've been talking to our team ever since the pandemic, really, that, when we were all sort of pushed in, isolated physically and technologically into our own kind of bubbles. And I've said that the public library is one of those unique democratic institutions where people can come together, people of all stripes, regardless of what you have or what you don't have or where you came from, can come together and interact with one another to learn from one another. And I think that's, and that's true with the collections that we build, to see a world that's and to see a world that's much larger than the one that's right in front of you. And I'll mention, Nancy said that we don't really see a lot of that locally, these kind of challenges to books. And that's true. Every time I've gone out and given talks to groups about intellectual freedom and our commitment to defending that, overwhelmingly the audiences are like, yeah, why would anybody do that? I mean, and it's hard because defending free speech means defending someone's ability to say something that you don't agree with. And I think that's really at the heart of this. And I will stand behind that too. I mean, that's part of the core principles, of that this country was founded upon. And while we don't see that locally here, I'd be remiss if I did not mention that the last biennium budget that the General Assembly put together did have language in it that would have required libraries to sequester materials that reference anything around sexual orientation or gender identity into areas where youth, now I'm talking 18 and younger, would not be able to see them, and which, in addition to being an unfunded mandate that would cost public libraries, millions of dollars across the state, it also would relegate some of our smaller branches to being adults only libraries because we just don't have the space to sequester those materials. And so gratefully, the Governor DeWine, who's been a tremendous champion for public libraries and the role that libraries play in helping, in his words, our communities live up to their God-given potential. He vetoed that in the budget before it was finalized. And so I'm not sure that we won't see something like that rear its head again in this General Assembly, but it's something we keep a really close eye on as a public library system, because when you start limiting people's access to what they can read or what they can say, it is a very, very slippery slope. And we've seen that pop up in different places around the country. Unfortunately, we've seen courts shut that down pretty quickly because it is a violation of the First Amendment.
And as you mentioned, the governor ended up vetoing that provision, but the fact that this still was something that state legislators had considered making the governor sign, what do you think that says just about the general culture of libraries and how it's being changed, or how lawmakers are attempting to change it?
I think there's public libraries have enjoyed a lot of trust within our communities, and we've built that trust over decades. And I think that there is an attempt to erode some of that trust in our communities. And I think that language in the budget spoke to a real disconnect between some of our elected officials and the communities that they represent. And so I think that the folks behind that are listening to particularly loud activists who, again, I think are a vocal minority of people who want to determine what we should have access to and what we shouldn't have access to. So they're listening to this vocal minority, but I think they're also not spending enough time in their own public libraries and talking to their own community members about what they would like to see in those libraries.
And this final question here, I think both of you can speak to, is in general, during Banned Books Week, as Jason mentioned at the start of the interview, it's a time where a lot of people approach texts that are being banned, and because they have that curiosity to see why those texts are being banned. And so moving forward, what are your hopes for the future of libraries in our country, and of course, the future of how legislators approach them?
Yeah, take that one, Nancy.
That's a big question.
That's a very big question, Jade. Yeah. No.
So I've been thinking about how always during my nearly 40 years in public libraries, we have encouraged families, parents, guardians, grandparents to use the library with their young people and to participate in the choices that their kids are making at the library. Reading books together is a great way to have conversations, sometimes about things that might not come up in your house otherwise. But as the grown-up, you do get to decide what your own children read or don't read. And so I think that that's my recommendation to everybody is use the library with your kids.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a public asset. It's a public institution that frankly we are privileged to be able to steward and to lead and to provide to our community. And it doesn't exist without people using it, right? And so I would second Nancy's suggestion that people people come with their kids and come by themselves and honestly take advantage of what the library has to offer. We've seen some studies that show that there's a decline in reading for pleasure. And so we really want to push this idea of rediscovering reading for our communities, because rediscovering the pleasure of reading, because it really does. It is a window and a mirror, to borrow from that quote that Nancy mentioned.
Thank you both for joining me. This was a great conversation.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Jaden.